Hi, this is Foster Aviano, and welcome to my podcast. We are going to be covering Chapter 12 and the crisis that is Hurricane Sandy. Now, here in this article that we will be covering, which is called Crisis and Resilience, it is just pictures of Hurricane Sandy, and here we have two pictures, both taken during the height of Hurricane Sandy, which ravaged 7 countries in the Caribbean and the entire length of the eastern United States in October of 2012. Now here, we take a look at the first picture. It seems as though water is just flooding the entire streets. Light poles are down, cars are destroyed, a total destruction, looking as though it's almost catastrophic from this picture. It's nighttime, very dark, and from what we get in this picture is that this hurricane was absolutely horrible for everyone involved. Now, just below, we have figure 12.6, which shows a delivery man in New York City just seemingly pedaling his bike through the streets. Looks like a little bit of rain, almost completely unconcerned with the hurricane entirely. And if you compare the two pictures, it seems that they are from two different times and places altogether, judging by how drastic the incidences are and the crisis level. Now, I would like to touch on the fact that hurricanes are interesting, as well as crises are interesting. And with these two pictures supplemented here, it's easy to understand this. You have one side of the crisis that gets hit so terribly, and then you have another side that is almost not affected, and people wonder, how does this stuff happen? Now, I'm here to explain that to you and all of my listeners and viewers out there, that this is actually very common, but what people don't understand in the commonality of this is that everyone eventually is somehow affected by crisis like this. Here today we have a special guest, and I will be bringing them in shortly. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned for more. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Foster Aviano. This is my podcast on Chapter 12, Crisis and Evasion. We have a very special guest here, Natalie Sinclair from Charleston, South Carolina. Hello, Natalie.
Thanks.
How's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
Good. You know, hanging out, just doing my thing.
Yeah, of course.
Now, would you like to give some of the viewers and listeners a little bit of a backstory about why we brought you in today?
Of course. So, I'm from Charleston, and if you don't know what happened there last year, we got hit by a pretty serious hurricane, and I lived close to the beach, so we had a lot of damage in our house, especially the lower levels, and it was just a really big impact not only on the people that lived there on the beach, but also as a community. So, yeah.
That's definitely interesting, and a great reason why we could bring you in today and ask you a few questions, if you don't mind.
Of course.
All right, so first question I have for you, and I'm sure everybody would be interested to know, is could you explain to us maybe how some areas were generally affected greatly, and maybe the community was brought together from that instance?
So, where I lived, like I said before, we were really hard hit by this hurricane, but I had a lot of friends who weren't hit as bad. I mean, very minimal damage, but they still came out with their families and more friends, and we really just did like a big community effort to clean up. So we were able to accomplish a lot more just because the generosity of these people was so great.
That's always amazing to see, and when you look in the media, a lot of times you'll see that being brought out, and generally that is what Americans and people of our country like to see. They like to see that we come together in times of despair like this, and it's really amazing to have that happen. Something that I always was wondering about this hurricane specifically, were there any areas that were so tragically damaged they were unrecoverable or just unmanageable?
So, as much as the community did try and help a lot of these areas, Edisto Beach was just completely destroyed, and the whole beach was just covering the island. Like, the water was all in there.
Oh my God.
It was, they had to get all the people out, but nobody could go and clean up because you just couldn't get back on the island. So it was really hard to see so many houses just left there because you couldn't do anything. So,
Wow.
yeah.
That is actually, that sounds devastating.
Yeah, it was.
I'm sorry if, anything is too personal here.
Oh,
Please
no,
let me
you're
know.
good.
Alright, just making sure. So were there any areas that were not that greatly affected by the hurricane?
Mhm.
Because the way that the media sets it up is that when this kind of instance occurs, it's almost as though every part of Charleston, South Carolina, was devastated by this hurricane, which seems unfathomable to the outside viewer. I mean, to most, I'm sure, some extent, people want to know, are you okay? What's going on? But I am a little skeptical to believe that it's really everyone.
Yeah, it was definitely hyped up a lot more. I mean, there were definitely areas that were damaged, but for the most part, outside of the beach area, the inland areas weren't as badly affected, even though the media really said, like, everything's destroyed, especially when the hurricane was coming up Florida, and you just heard, like, complete destruction, so all of us were wondering, like, is it really true? Are we really going to get hit bad? So, definitely hearing from relatives asking if we were okay, because they were like, your house is completely destroyed, and it was really overhyped. Even though there was a lot of damage, there was a lot of areas that were just perfectly fine.
Right. So, would you say that a lot of the drama is attributed to how the media plays up these kind of crises?
For sure. I mean, it's definitely important to remember that there are still areas that are going to be affected, but by really affecting the whole community by saying that everything is going to be destroyed, it shuts down a lot more before the hurricane and after the hurricane, because people aren't really sure what's going on. So it's kind of clouding what's really going on.
I totally could see how that would affect, a whole community. I'm sure businesses are shutting down early. They're losing money. There are people who have children, they can't send them to schools. Maybe they're still working. I could see that a lot of things could be thrown off by the media's portrayal of such a crisis like that. Well, Natalie, that's all the time we have today for our podcast. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's always a pleasure having you. Stay tuned for more. We'll be back, I'm sure, with another great chapter. Thank you so much for watching. Keep it real.